Welcome, everybody. This is the History Dose live stream with me, Chris from History Dose, my brother Joe, the artist editor of the channel, and the other one who's not related to us, Stefan Milo.
As far as we're aware.
Maybe distantly if we go back 500,000 years.
That's what this stream is about, actually. We have something to tell you.
Ancestry.
Yeah.
Results are in.
Yeah.
So why don't you give us a rundown of who you are, Stefan, and what your channel's about?
Yeah, I'm Stefan, and mainly I talk about stuff that happened quite a long time ago, a long time ago. We were just chatting in the preamble before this, and I referred to my video on the Roman period as modern history. So that gives you a sense of my perspective on time.
With all the cars and planes. And,
Yeah. So typically I talk about archaeology and human evolution, a lot of ancient DNA topics. It's things like Neanderthals, Homo erectus. I just did a video on woolly mammoths. I got another video coming out this month on the Bronze Age. Old stuff, old stuff, but a lot of interviews too. I think that's one thing that might stick. I can't remember the phrase. Stick my channel out. What's the phrase? I don't know. Something a little bit unique to my channel. Yeah, is that I do a lot of interviews, more than average, I think. I don't know.
And you incorporate them into the episode, though.
Yeah. It's not, like a podcast or anything. I use the interviews to guide the videos a little bit.
This is actually just us stealing your format here. This next video is on Neanderthals. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, you're recording this one?
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to. Well, basically, we have some questions for each other, and we'll get the ball rolling. We don't have a ton of questions for each other, but that's kind of just an excuse to keep the conversation rolling. You are also welcome to throw questions in the chat. Of course, some priority given to super chats. We appreciate your support for the channel. And then I kind of wanted to, let's start with a couple. There's a thumbnail I came up with. Me finding a pic of Stefan on Google Images and pasting it in there. Do you know what this is? What the background is? I want to see if you know. The hands.
Tricky.
Oh, it's a bunch of hands on a cave.
The hands. There is some pretty. I don't know. It could be several places. It could be Australia. It could be Argentina. Could be Europe. I don't know. I don't know specifically. Where is it?
We're right with Argentina. Cueva de las Manos.
Yeah.
Argentina. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really incredible one, that one down there.
Special shout out to a couple of our Patreon supporters with the Con and Leader tier. We have Benissimo, Kevin Lee, Omri, and Matthew Ochoa, and everybody else. I put the link to the Patreon in the description there. And this is the Stefan stream. Let's just start. It's kind of annoying how they do. Trying to integrate with that StreamYard, it's hard to get the animations to bring on separate questions at different times. But I just want to start with a couple of the Patreon questions. This one, Ian Pendleton says, is for any of us. Are there any subjects you've wanted to get to for a long time, a month or more, but haven't been able to get to for whatever reason?
I've got so many, but. Do you want to go first? Should I go first?
Your best one, but yeah, you got to go first.
Gosh, a month for me is not a big production window for a video. I'm regularly working on videos for longer than a month, so I'm gonna extend the time frame of this. But a real goal of mine is to go to Dmanisi in Georgia, which is a really famous archaeological site, one of the oldest archaeological sites outside of Africa, full of bones and really incredible archaeology. It dates to about 1.8 million years ago. And that only stumbling block is taking my 2 young children as far away as Georgia. But that's a real goal of mine to get over there. I think I can do it. I want to do it. I'm gonna do it. It's just the logistics of taking my family
One of
that
those
far.
you just
Tricky.
have to do. You just need to tell them there's no Disney World this year.
Yeah,
It's Georgia.
we're going to Dmanisi World. It's like
We're gonna go see bodies.
You remember? I thought you guys mentioned you always wanted to do that, right?
Yeah.
You have to lie a bit. The roller coasters are amazing. Have you seen
I mean, my kids do love all these skulls for sure. They're always playing with them. So,
Balls, they're just throwing them around.
Yeah. So that was mine. I'd love to go over there and do something like that. Georgia looks like a beautiful country too, so it'd be a great trip, I'm sure. What about you guys?
I think ours would probably be we talked about it before, and then I did a stream asking what people would want to, in terms of, or not a stream, a poll asking what people would want for a like behemoth video. Like our videos have so much art from Joe, and it takes forever to write, and I footnote everything, so it's like takes forever. But we're talking like an hour to 90-minute history dose one.
I was thinking you guys should do a big video like that. It'd be a huge success, I'm sure.
Yeah,
it just will take so much time.
The idea we had was Alexander the Great, though, and so that would be something that would take months and months, and maybe we're working on it as we're still publishing regular videos.
So you're working on your normal, regular monthly releases, but then when you have the free time, you start chipping away at the Alexander the Great epic, and then over the course of 6-7 months, it's ready to go.
Yeah, I'm actually reading a book at the minute about Alexander and Philip. I can't remember the name of it. It might actually be called Alexander and Philip, or Philip and Alexander. And that'd be a tough one, man. There's actually a lot of history to crawl through.
Yeah, well, I also think the art would be amazing too. Just the variety of art, basically going from the Mediterranean to India and everything in between.
Yeah.
And you're just like, I don't know.
That
would be the goal. Is like you kind of sometimes we get complaints and they're just like, but the video just started and it ended. It's like 8 minutes long or 9 minutes, still like 20 paintings in it or something.
Yeah.
But if you just let your subscribers just be like, let me sit back for an hour and 90 minutes and just enjoy, and we'll just be like, this is the best thing we've ever made.
I really think so. Have you ever seen the YouTube channel Melody Sheep? Have you ever seen that guy before?
Yeah. No, that guy's intense. That's a full movie thing. Yeah.
It's intense, but I can't help but think like his video where it's the journey to the end of time, and it's got, last time I saw it, had over 70 million views.
Wow.
I mean,
how long is that?
I can't remember.
Is it like a longer video?
I do think YouTube likes a longer video. There is that, because a lot of people like a long history video to fall asleep to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And
it's funny. I've been told I have a calming voice, and people say that they fall asleep to my voice.
Okay, so this video is only 30 minutes long, 29 minutes, 21 seconds. It's currently on 103 million views.
Insane.
That's for those for the people watching. That's probably life-changing money. If you make a video and it gets 100 million views, that's going to change your whole life.
Yeah, that's pretty insane. Just give me one like that.
I think you could do that, guys. I think you got it in you. I think you've got a history epic in you. I really do.
So, okay, so let me just get to the. I just have one more from the Patreon. This one, he's a Patreon, so I let it slide. But he kind of did 3 questions in one. And let me just read you the questions. Maybe just give us a picture of your impression of what this looked like. But he says, by my understanding, prehistoric tribes were nomadic people. Was there a specific size in which groups normally traveled? Did they try to visit previously visited spots, like in a circle, or were they aimlessly moving from one spot to the next? Also, was there any hierarchy among them, or did they live mostly as equals? What can we tell from that time period? What's your impression of how people lived, what their social structure looked like?
That's a complicated question. there's so much variation, right? Depending on what time period you're talking about and when you're talking about. If you're talking about Neanderthals, our evidence suggests that they lived in very small groups, maybe 20 to 50, I want to say. Rough estimate. These are all rough numbers. All of these things are estimates, right? And I'm pulling them off the top of my head too. But I want to say like 20 people, 50 people, and they came into contact with others very rarely. And we know that because of inbreeding in their genetics. So if you go that far back, human populations, very small, very spread out, not frequently in contact with each other. When you go forward to like, I don't know, let's say 6 to 10,000 years ago, something like that. Some people around the world are practicing agriculture. Some people are still living as hunter-gatherers. Then probably people are living in larger communities, maybe 100. You can sometimes see evidence of like mass mammoth kill sites, maybe, where people are probably coming back to these same spots periodically and probably meeting up with other groups when they're doing that. With the groups that are practicing agriculture, their settlements are slowly getting bigger and bigger. There are places like Çatalhöyük where people are living in full-on villages, hundreds of people together in the same spot, maybe even thousands. And that's sort of like 8,000 years ago. As for the social structure, well, it's so hard to say.
There's no written documents about it, or
no, there's no written documents, and there isn't like a huge variation in material culture.
Well, because you wonder maybe would it show up in burials? Would that be a possible way you could glean it? If there's some graves.
By the time you get to the Bronze Age, let's just talk about Europe, just for the ease of picking one spot. By the time you get to the Bronze Age, you start to see individual burials that seemingly have a lot of material culture put in them. What that person meant to their community is still impossible to say, but they clearly invested a lot of time and energy in memorializing this person, right? You could say that at least. They probably were some political power in some way. When you go before that, back into the Stone Age, back into the Neolithic period, you get interesting things like, for example, there's a stone mace head in one of the burials at Stonehenge that had traveled all the way from the north of Scotland.
Yeah.
Did that signify that person as some sort of chieftain? Maybe not. They weren't buried with anything else. They were, in fact, cremated. So it's hard to say. There are these long chambered tombs called passage tombs.
All throughout Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, throughout Ireland, throughout a lot of Western Europe, Scandinavia. And this comes up in my next video about plague in the Bronze Age and Neolithic period, out this month. Smash that bell. But so they did a DNA study. They were able to get a lot of samples from one grave, and they could see that the men in this grave were all related to each other, but the women are coming from outside communities. So the grandfather is in the tomb, his son is in the tomb, the grandson is in the tomb. There's a straight direct descent of the male line in this tomb. But what does that mean? Does that mean that family had political power in some way?
You also have the use of red ochre in a lot of Paleolithic graves. Like you have the Red Lady of Paviland. In Wales, where did it look like they ritually defleshed the body, or what? Did they just dyed it with the bones with red ochre or something?
On the Lady of Paviland,
which turned out to be a man, I think.
I think it was a man.
Yeah, it was like a hunter or something.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head if they were defleshed. Certainly, such things happened in prehistory. You do sometimes in the Paleolithic get the odd, really, really elaborate burial There's one in Italy called the Prince Il Principe, very elaborate burial, and it's just basically you could interpret it either way. Was this person given special treatment because they had political power or some high rank? Maybe.
Or was it a curse on the remains or something?
Was it? Yeah, it's we can never go back and ask them. And the other thing is we have a huge bias in the archaeological record, right? So we don't know if the treatment of these bodies was that way because they were special, or was it that way or like it stands out to us, but maybe everyone was buried that way and we just haven't found them, or they haven't survived. Maybe they were buried that way if they happened to die near a cave and people had the time to prepare a burial. But what happened to the people who died in the many migrations they did, between spots? That was another thing, they're migrating aimlessly. I don't think they migrated aimlessly. They're probably very familiar with their landscape, knew where to get resources.
I think that's how most nomads are too. Like you work out a pretty consistent system to figure out where you need to be for the winter, where you need to be for hunting and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, seemed like that would be pretty quickly evolve, not in a biological sense, but just like in a selection sense. The groups that can figure out where to go are the groups that are going to survive.
Yeah, and can sort of like anticipate animal behavior. You see a lot of Paleolithic sites in valleys that probably channeled game and stuff like that along the coast where you have all the marine resources. What happened when someone, say they're in this time period where they're moving from one spot to the next, there's a change of season or something like that, and someone dies on that route, how did they treat them? How did they dispose of the body? We'll probably never know, so these things are tricky to say.
It's your job to answer it.
I can't. Sorry. History Days Patreon supporter. These things are too... If you want to look at an elaborate burial from the Paleolithic and interpret it as someone having like a vast amount of political power, I suppose that's not crazy, but we'll never know.
Well, so there's always going to be a certain amount of speculation, but I'll use this as a segue to get into our first question for you, which was, let me put it on the bottom here. What opinion about prehistory have you changed or evolved on in the last few years?
Good question. I think one thing that I've changed my opinion on for sure is whether humans, modern Homo sapiens and Neanderthals are the same species or different species. I would probably used to think of them as a different species, but now I've chatted to a lot of geneticists. I've done a lot of videos on ancient DNA on my channel, and I'm actually going on Thursday to the ancient DNA lab at Berkeley, which will be really exciting. Can't wait for that.
Wow.
So I'm a lot more familiar with the genetic evidence
of
our evolution than I used to be. And humans and Neanderthal, we are the same species.
Same genus, right? Their full name is Homo Neanderthal, right?
Well, you could call it Homo neanderthalensis. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Homo sapiens. I've even got them here. Let's see him. Why not? Let me see.
I think my Neanderthal skull was in the other room, so I'm not going to go get. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So these are two really interesting examples. This is Shanidar 1. This person lived in Iraq probably about 50 to 70,000 years ago. Had a very hard life, lots of injuries. This is a combination of two skeletons, Oase 1 and Oase 2. These were both found in Romania. This person lived about 40-ish thousand years ago. And what's cool about this person, or at least the person who owned this jaw, is that we know they had a Neanderthal ancestor about like 4 to 5 to 6 generations ago. This is the closest we've gotten so far to a human Neanderthal hybrid.
Wow.
50-50. And considering where and when Shanidar 1 lived, it's almost also quite likely that they had Homo sapien ancestry as well. We know Neanderthals had Homo sapien ancestry as well, from a long time ago. And thinking back on what I said earlier, these groups are very small and they're very rarely in contact with each other. It's like Neanderthals and Homo sapiens are just the extreme ends of that spectrum, right? They've just been separated for a lot longer and a bigger distance of time. But fundamentally, we can have children together, and it's really not obvious how you would draw a species boundary between us. There is some evidence that we were close to being separated, because there's probably some variations of Homo sapien Neanderthal hybrids that couldn't have children, we think, based on the evidence we have, almost like mules. But still, in some combinations, it did work. And yeah, the world back then is hard to imagine, but there's just very few humans around with bumping into each other. And these are just two ends of this spectrum of not much contact. I don't know. We're not really a separate species, I'd say. I can't really think about it that way anymore. And then when you get into Denisovans, if we're separate species, where do Denisovans fit into this and all of this stuff? We're just a spectrum of very sparsely connected human groups that occasionally banged. So that's something I've changed my opinion on before. I used to be, wow. You could see, look at the skulls and think, these are different people, clearly.
Well, when they were first discovering Neanderthal skulls in quarries and stuff in the 19th century, they were originally assumed to just be human skulls from 5,000 years ago or something. They just thought they were ancient skulls until they sent them out and they're like, oh, this is Neanderthal and this is Homo erectus and stuff. And then there was that whole debate over, is this a different species or what is it?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's there was a German scientist, I can't remember their specific field, but they were around at their time at the discovery of the Neanderthals, and they thought they should be called Homo stupidus.
Oh yeah, Homo stupidus. Yeah.
Fortunately, they didn't go with that name. That would have been really unfortunate. But
well, then you don't want to say they're part of the same species. No, that's not.
Yeah.
Neanderthals have made a comeback. They used to be kind of a lower reputation, especially in Hollywood and stuff. And
well, I feel
we're
like
starting to figure out they have rituals
finding out
and
more.
Stuff.
Every time I get an update from Stefan Milo channel, it's always Neanderthals are smarter than you think. Or
yeah, they're doing advanced arithmetic on cave walls.
Yeah.
You just go, oh, wow, I didn't know they did that. And it's kind of like dinosaurs and feathers. Every time you see a new depiction of a dinosaur, you're like, it's more feathers than before.
Yeah.
Miss Bill Nye when it was 100% scale and skin.
Yeah. It's interesting our changing perspective on Neanderthals, because on the one hand we do know so much more about them now, and their intelligence is clearly much greater than we assumed back in the day, and they're creating art and all of these things. But
a lot of jewelry,
yeah, they're doing all this stuff. They're making glues from different compounds like amber and tar and all these things to help build their tools. But but it's always important to bear in mind the Paleolithic could have been way stranger than we think. If we could actually observe them behaving, it might be really strange to us. It might be really odd to us, what they would do and how they would act and how they would treat each other. I mean, we don't know if they had a language like we're talking now. We don't know that.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I was wondering about too, so let me spoil it for whoever's on this stream, but one of the ideas, if we were going to do a prehistoric one, thought about, this is how it would be branded, but it obviously have more nuance to this, but Homo sapien and Neanderthal conflicts, battles and stuff like that. Obviously there must have been some level of conflict between them. What could we speculatively say that would have been like? But I think the nuance that would be in there, and this is just something I was thinking as I did a bit of preliminary research. I don't know when it would come out. I probably have to talk to you about it. but is that these kind of distinctions that we have in our head that say, oh, look, these are morphologically different things, different beings, they must be against each other. That might not actually be how it would have worked. That might not, you think if there's a certain level of interbreeding, you would expect, there are part Homo sapien, part Neanderthal kids running around, and Neanderthals living alongside Homo sapiens in some certain groups, just because even though we have the bias to say these are two different species, they must be against each other and they must be sticking together. If there's enough kind of overlap and ability to breed, and let's say similar intelligence or communication level, then it makes sense that you could have like hybrid groups basically running around, or some part Neanderthal, some part Homo sapiens within the same group or tribe, and just sort of like that's accepted. That's
I think that was much more likely the case, and I don't even think that they thought of themselves as different groups. I just think like there are these human populations spread out, and where they're meeting is this gray area. It almost certainly was in like Western Asia, probably. But yeah, just in Western Asia, where these two groups have contact, there's just a slow blurring of the lines of these groups. And we, Homo sapiens from Africa, probably just had a greater population for whatever reason, probably cultural reasons, cultural memory, all these sorts of things. They just developed a lifestyle maybe that gave us an edge in numbers. But I think if you could rewind the clock, I bet they would just be living as sort of one group with like mixed ancestry. I really think that. But who's to say? I could be totally wrong, but
yeah.
Do you kind of get the point that I'm trying to say? It's just like where these two groups meet, it's just sort of blurred, but one group has a much larger population than the other.
Yeah. Have we found burial sites where there are full-blooded Neanderthals alongside Homo sapiens?
No. There always seems to be.
But you think in principle it's possible there might be something like that out there?
I think in principle it's possible. I think the stumbling block to finding it is that situation may have only existed for a few thousand years, for example. Yeah. And so finding the archaeological site at the perfect time, tricky. There are all sorts of challenges with that.
Well, and you think too, conflicts that would have existed between them, to sort of harken back to my point, may have been just out of pure survival and not out of some, like a Homo sapien group that is trying to survive in a certain region may be just as hostile to another Homo sapien group as they would to a Neanderthal group.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think they'd have.
They're not like these guys are shorter. Get them.
Yeah.
look at the eyebrow ridge there.
Yeah, I mean, they were pretty jacked and they were pretty stocky. I'd probably give them a wide margin if it was me. But
I did see a question on Reddit. As I was doing my research, sometimes like a Reddit result will come up, and a lot of times the Reddit results are pretty good because it'll lead you down a rabbit hole. But I forget where this was asked. It was like I think it was like a subreddit, who would win or something. And it was like hypothetical about putting a Neanderthal in the UFC and giving him like 2 years of training, and how well would he do? And like everyone was like, he will wipe the floor with everybody else. You cannot take him down.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't know if we're overrating the strength of Neanderthals, but at least my uneducated opinion, based on the educated opinions of random Redditors, is that the Neanderthal is the next world champion.
They were stockier, yeah. They were stockier. I wonder if they would have the reach, though. I don't know. That would be an interesting lineup for sure. Yeah. I wouldn't want to wrestle one, probably. Definitely not.
Impossible to get on the ground. So I'm going to let you ask your question, but one I'll get to, and I'm saving some of these audience questions as they're coming in. but there was one that was a bit related to what we were just talking about. And
Also,
again,
super chats get priority, just to let you guys know.
that's right.
Yeah.
Turn the cheese upside down says, how do we know when complex language abilities evolved? How is it possible to get that from artifacts?
I would say it's impossible to get it from artifacts, not to be a bummer. But I would say it's probably impossible to know precisely when it evolved. Like all apes communicate, right? Gorillas communicate with each other, chimpanzees communicate with each other. And for our entire evolution, we've been communicating with each other. The point that it becomes complex language, it's so tricky to say. It's so tricky to say. I mean, I would imagine that Neanderthals also had some form of language. I can't imagine us really successfully interbreeding with another group that couldn't talk, right? So we can infer stuff like that. There are like deeply diverged human groups in Africa who haven't been in contact for tens and hundreds of thousands of years, and all Africans also have languages. So it's so tricky to say. I would say we've had complex language for hundreds of thousands of years, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000. What I would be really interested to see personally is if we go back like 800,000 to 1,000,000 years and we bumped into a Homo erectus, or we bumped into a Homo heidelbergensis, someone like that. How did they communicate with each other? Because they're for sure at that point not modern humans. They're not even our close cousins and part-time lovers like Neanderthals. They're not modern humans. But nevertheless, they're very successful. They spread out across the whole world. They're making relatively complex tools. You know, a hand axe might require removing 100 flakes, for example, to make a nice hand axe. They're seeing a rock and they're taking like 100 steps to turn it into a tool.
Yeah, I mean, you would almost guess, that once you're building things, whether it's just you're constructing tools, or of course, once you're making what we would recognize as buildings, or maybe even shelters too. Maybe it's I guess a reasonable assumption to make that they have words for the things that they are making. If they make them in the same way, like it would have just been most expedient to come up with a sound for the head of the axe and the thing of the axe, you know, the handle.
Well, my theory is usually when there's evidence that culture has reached some type of artistry, they've reached a symbolic stage where they're now using symbols. And we have Neanderthal art that's representing animals. We have that
it's representing animals, the Neanderthal art.
There was like that thing that's like there's a ladder and then there's something next to it. And there's a theory that might have been some type of animal. But then we also have that mask, like the Roche Cotard mask, which there's
Roche
like
Cotard mask.
There's like it's ROCHECOTARD. I think that was like a Neanderthal thing. And there's debate over whether or not it's a tool or if it's maybe representing a face.
That's interesting.
So I think when you get to the part where when you're creating art, you've now developed a part of your thinking that's symbolic. And when you advance to that, it's not much of a stretch to think you could have words which could symbolize, tree, cave.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right about that. Once humans are creating all those incredible cave paintings that you see across Europe, and now they have really early examples in Indonesia as well. It's hard to imagine that these didn't have stories to go along with them.
Yeah. And then you have the burials and stuff, like the one in wasn't there one in like Israel that they found where like the kid had like a deer skull and they placed the child's hand on the deer skull, and there might be something. There's something in Spain too, I think you did something on it. It was like burial with or a cave of skulls or something. It had a bunch of
Yeah.
Viking skulls in it.
Yeah. There's a cave in Spain where they seem to just put skulls. There isn't like
Yeah,
almost no other piece of bone from the animals in this cave apart from skulls. And in particular, they're all skulls of horned animals as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, you can't imagine someone doing that without talking in some way, without some explanation of what
and
they're
there's
doing.
definitely like
No.
there's a symbolic atmosphere to it going on.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. By then,
It's so
I
hard
think
though.
we've
It's
complex
pretty-
language.
that we go crazy with our imagination in that. Like, of course, there is some symbolism in there. There's a reason why they're doing it, at least to themselves. But I don't know if you've ever seen the I think it's the channel like Wizards and Guns has a video on like it's like a comedic channel, but they have a video on the History Channel finding your room like 10,000 years from now, and they're like having a robot go through, and there's like Crocs with some different I don't know, like some beads or buttons on it, and they're just like the History Channel, like, obviously this must have been somebody of great importance to have these designs, these possibly sacred jewels encrusted in his shoes. And it's like some kid who watches anime and plays video games or something and has a pair of Crocs in his shoes, and they're like, it is, you know, like there's a certain element of like, okay, we can make these things, but you can't say them super declaratively. You can be like,
you can't. And to be devil's advocate with like the Homo erectus making a complex tool that takes 100 steps, the counter argument is look at how complex bird behavior can be. A bird will make incredibly elaborate nests. Some birds, like bower birds, will collect artifacts from their environment to try and attract a mate. And this is all like in their DNA. They don't communicate with each other. They don't learn it from their parents. There's something in their DNA that compels them to behave this way. And it could be that Homo erectus is doing all these things and not talking to each other at all. Or, well, not more so than, you know, the general communication that all social animals have, right? Like we all communicate a little bit, but complex language, they might not have had it, honestly.
all right. Okay, so I got your question in here for Joe and I.
Just because it reminded me of just when you were just saying then. It's a good segue.
What non-history channels are you watching? I'll give two, and I'll allow Joe to think of his. In the meantime, one of them is I love movie analysis, film analysis. Just sitting down, just you could probably tell from our videos. There's a certain amount of like cinema involved in terms of how we get the music down and the themes or the prose of it or something, and being able to make people experience something. And for us, it's kind of just how do you make people experience something in the past and have that be compelling, but also educational in the same time. So you're learning those things along the way while you're just watching a story.
Yeah.
So one of those channels is like Stories of Old.
Stories of Old.
Like Stories of Old, but he just
like
has. It's just, you know, he'll sit with a movie for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and you know, it's just wonderful analysis, and he kind of has like some cinema to the way he produces it too. Like it's not just rote analysis, but it's kind of it's worth a watch. He has some really great ones on Lord of the Rings as well. It just dives deep into the themes and allows you to just sort of like rethink a movie that you watched or something that you liked and understand why you liked it.
Yeah.
The second one is a bit less profound, but if you've ever watched CoffeeZilla, that guy,
Yeah.
It's just so satisfying. Like here's a scammer that's, you know, ripping everybody off, and you just have, he's one of those guys who are just like, he's the like annoying kid in your class that studies relentlessly and badgers the teacher or something, but he's going after, you know, the bad guys online, and you're like, he knows how to track your crypto activity to see that you scam these people, and he talked to your 10 closest friends already. So it's like, he's going to expose you, and there's always a sense of karma. You're just like, even if he's not legally coming after you, now those people have to respond because you're running some crypto scam, and he's popular enough that now 3 million people know about it. So CoffeeZilla is always a good time.
Yeah. His like journey to being CoffeeZilla is super interesting. Well, because he used to do like educational explainer videos as well. And was it Coffee Break or something?
Yeah, that's what I originally subscribed to, and then he just started doing different stuff, and it was just okay. It was that's what got really big, and now he's like going to war with Logan Paul and stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's maybe damn. I wish I'd have tweaked this question then. Was thinking of CoffeeZilla in his transition there. If you weren't making history videos, what do you think you guys would be doing on YouTube?
Art stuff.
You think art stuff?
Joe, not me. You don't want to see my art channel.
I have a really early, very baby art channel right now. I only have 600 subscribers. I started it like a month ago, but
Joe's technically a small YouTuber,
and I'm a parasite on History Dose. So whenever I release a video, we do like a History Dose community post. I'm like, subscribers, come on in. And so
yeah,
I have 600, and it's all because of History Dose. Hopefully, I'm hoping my talent is causing people to subscribe to.
I've always thought like film analysis would be cool to do. And then the two other avenues these I think would actually be incorporated into History Dose eventually in some way, but interviews with people who lived through certain historical events. So almost like a podcast, but you're talking to veterans or Holocaust survivors, or I've done we did for our Joe Gala one, which is still demonetized. That I interviewed a mobster, so there's still mobsters alive, and that would be interesting. That one's tough. That one's a bit like prehistory, where there's 50 different versions of every possible story, but it's more because like the mafia guys don't want to say, or everybody wants the big story of they killed Jimmy Hoffa. The one that I think wouldn't be connected to this channel, but I always thought would be cool. I've always loved animals, so it's like just Animal Dose or something. I don't know. Like
that would be a good one.
Like going to see wild animals and explaining their adaptations and what makes them interesting.
Yeah.
Joe, what channel did you have? Non-history channel that you are into?
What I'm watching right now. First one is I kind of like discovered her recently, but I've gone through some of her stuff, very like long form content. Jenny Nicholson, and she's like
Jenny Nicholson.
You know,
I think that might have pinged up on mine as well.
She usually finds these like failing franchises or projects and fully immerses herself in them. So one of them was like a fantasy giant RPG theme park called Evermore, and it's like gone downhill, but there were these big plans, and she did a 3-hour video about how she went there with her friend, and it's just like kind of fascinating. And then they went through like a lawsuit because like Taylor Swift had an album or a song called Evermore, and that like crushed them. And she did like one recently where she went to like the Star Wars hotel in like Disneyland, and it was just like incredibly fascinating how it's like you can tell the idea is not working, but they pumped millions and millions of dollars into it. And she's like, yeah, there's no sun. It's you're in a spaceship for like a week and there's no sun, and they have like fake windows there, TV screens where like you can see asteroids and planets going by, but like you turn off your lights in your hotel room to go to bed and they're still like going by on the screen. And so people like tape them over so you don't. So it's just like horrible ideas. So she's one channel, probably another channel / person is composer Christian Henson. I believe his name is Henson. And he has his own music company called Crow Hill Company, but he also used to work for Spitfire Audio. And because I'm composing music for History Dose now, he's been very helpful with figuring out, thematic scores, virtual instrument packages and stuff. He's worked with like Hans Zimmer and stuff. So it's very fascinating trying to figure out all this different type of music theory.
Yeah. Yeah. That is cool. When I see these Jenny Nicholson videos, 3 hours, 4 hours long, part of me wonders, is like the only thing separating me from fame and success is the ability to make a 4-hour video.
Yeah.
Is that what it takes?
She only
The
does
ad
like a couple a
revenue.
year either, but I'm betting she does make a good amount of money with that ad revenue for a 4-hour video. So
Yeah.
only needs to
Completely
release a couple
tear
times a
down
year.
a terrible corporate idea or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wondered if it would be like interesting just to visit. And a thing that a part of me feels like, God, that it's such like a easy format to make in a way. But just the like, I stayed at the worst hotel or the remotest hotel. Like a part of me just wants to do that, because our videos, I'm sure you'll agree, are so involved. They take weeks, months of work to get out.
You're stressed. I'm so stressed before every release that I got something wrong. I'm like rechecking, and you're like, oh shit, did I mispronounce that or something? And if you were just like, there's nothing to get wrong, it's the Star Wars hotel.
Yeah. I
Especially
wish
your comedy channel, you can roll with those things too. Like, you said the wrong name, and you're like, whatever.
Yeah, I wish. I'm so jealous of channels that can just film a video in a day and just start editing it, and that's gonna be the thing. I'm so jealous of that.
That would be great. Okay, so I have a question for you, and this is not a natural segue. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But anybody who works in archaeology or studies prehistory, we know you work for Big Dinosaur Bone or whatever.
Big Bone. I work for Big Bone.
Big Bone. Whatever dastardly corporation or mass elite institution is paying you guys off to tell us that these civilizations didn't exist or whatever. Anyway, I was just thinking, what pseudo-historical theory do you wish were true? It's not true. People say you're suppressing the truth of it, but you're like, man, it would be kind of cool if that was true.
Which one do I wish was true? I
know mine.
I think, I don't know, maybe that giants were real, that there was some offshoot of humanity, that there was like these 15-20 foot people just roaming around. That would be true. People say they're in the Smithsonian. I can't possibly comment on that, of course.
They hide them.
Yeah.
You've
seen the poorly photoshopped images of archaeologists uncovering like 30-foot human skulls.
You could be one. We have nothing for reference here.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is all perspective. These are actually 30 foot. It's just perspective. I'm in a massive warehouse.
Yeah, that would be cool. Well, there were some very big. Were they hominids, or am I just thinking like ape, like
Australopithecus?
Gigantopithecus or something.
Gigantopithecus was big. Yeah, Gigantopithecus was big.
It wasn't human.
By some estimates, like twice the size of a modern gorilla. So that's really starting to get big.
But I think they almost have them as like the people that believe in giants are kind of like, this is basically a human version of like a short-faced bear or something. Like enormous.
Well, we must have diverged from them a long time ago, because their closest relative is orangutans. So we've got to diverge from them between like 10 to 15 million years ago, I bet. But yeah, they're starting to get big there. Australopithecus, you mentioned, there was tiny. They were just about a meter, like 3 foot tall. Like when you imagine Lucy, she was tiny, up to your waist.
But so you're hoping there are giants out there. I mean, after your mammoth one, I'm kind of like, is King Kong really that improbable? We just need one island. Give me one island of giants.
Oh man, I wish. This isn't a pseudo historical thing, but this is a desire. of mine. I would love to find a Neanderthal in the permafrost. I don't know if it's possible, but you know how they find really well-preserved mammoths, just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they just died
Yeah.
recently.
Hey, there is a pseudo historical theory that there's still perhaps others. Well, perhaps you could find a Neanderthal out there somewhere, community of them in like kind of the dense forest lands of this world or something. There's some people who say the may be a Neanderthal.
The who?
Sasquatch, Bigfoot.
Oh,
Way too big.
too big, too hairy, I think, too.
Yeah.
I think we're not going to interbreed with
Yeah.
Sasquatch. That might be an ordeal.
Yeah. The giants. No, actually, we did. So we did one on the meetings between Native Americans and Vikings.
I saw
around
that,
1000 AD, and I'm kind of I just sort of set it up so we get like two very common comments on that. As I'm setting it up, I kind of wanted to like heighten the intensity of this meeting because it's like two hemispheres of the world that have basically been closed off for however many thousands of years, and now people are meeting again, and it's like, how wild is this that after all these years they've diverged, and now what are these people, how is their interaction? So I mentioned the land bridge, and that made a lot of people mad. Everybody informed me that it's since been debunked. And you look it up, you're like, it doesn't look like it's debunked.
Yeah, well, that's a trick. The land bridge was, of course, real between Asia and North America. The question was, well, I know what they're getting at. Did humans walk across it? Because it was blocked by glaciers for a long time.
Yeah, or was it a coastal?
Or was it a coastal thing? What they're thinking is the coastal route, yeah. But they still would have basically had to have island hopped or stuck to the coast of this.
You kind of need the bridge there anyway.
Yeah, you still need the bridge there. I don't think they were doing too many open sea voyages. But
the other very common comment is that later in the video, there's a European account that comes. It might have been like Icelandic or something, but it was like a monk, like 300 years after it. And at this point, all memory of Vinland had kind of evaporated. And so they had some vague idea that people had gone really far west, but what happened there, they're not really sure on. But so this monk was recording what we know of this land very far to the west. And he said, and it was said that giants lived there. And I refer to that as like a legend or fantasy in the thing. And I get so many comments of like, how do you know there weren't giants there? And like, why is this guy dismissing the giants? They were there.
Yeah. It's yeah. It's
Your
tricky with
bosses
the
to
pseudo
cover up the giant stuff. I don't know. You guys always seem so gleeful about shooting down Atlantis, and I'm like, no, I hear what you're saying, but I wish it were true. Like, I'm not happy. I wish it was.
I don't wish it were true. I don't wish it were true. I don't wish all our developments were gifted to us. I like the fact that we came up with it ourselves. That's why I didn't say that in that scenario. Okay. I don't wish Atlantis was true. Because it's kind of interesting that like humans independently developed agriculture all around the world.
I guess I wasn't thinking of the Atlantis as the spawn of everything that we've ever done, but the idea that there was an advanced civilization that went underwater would be kind of cool.
It would be cool.
It would be
cool if there was like with Plato's story of Atlantis and stuff. It would be cool if we did find like a Bronze Age island nation or something like that we had no idea about. That would be very cool and maybe inspired that story. Some people say it was like Santorini or whatever, or the Mycenaeans, but it would be cool if there was, I suppose, another civilization out there to find. And there are in a way, of course, but
yeah, well, everybody has the dreams of finding what they consider to be a very advanced civilization, and they basically have electricity or some spiritual force that drives some vehicles or something.
Yeah.
I don't think we're finding that.
That's how they always get out of it. When you're like, well, how advanced could they be? We don't have any evidence of metallurgy or cities or stuff like that. And then sometimes people fall back on, well, maybe they were spiritually advanced. How do you know they're not moving things with their mind, with chanting and stuff? And it's like, well, we can't find chants in the archaeological record. You could be right, but we can't search for chanting.
I thought this was let me see. I thought this was pretty funny. This is how we learned how to make the pyramids.
Yeah,
just the hard hat on the alien.
The hard hat really does make it. Yeah,
like they didn't build it, but they kind of gave them the blueprints or something.
Like how the aliens are using parchment as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they traveled across the universe.
Yeah, they still
write it down on papyrus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they still made the Egyptians do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I did see on.
Go ahead. Go ahead, and then hit me with your question after.
No, I did see online that the ancient civilization people are arguing with the ancient aliens people. Of whether they're ancient, they've turned against each other and stuff. It was really funny to see that on Twitter.
I don't know. I feel like if aliens did give us all of this ancient technology, aren't we kind of failing? Like they were so advanced that they had interstellar, and we're still like 5,000 years after the fact. We still don't have anything close to what they had, interstellar travel and all that.
Yeah,
we messed it up.
Yeah, this is kind of a. I don't know if you have a question for the audience, but my next one, it might require you to think for a minute.
Okay,
I can think of an example as well.
Okay, let me hit you with a. I'll give you an audience question to chew on while I think about this. What historical event would have gone differently if you were there? Let me hit you with one while Joe and I think about that. What is the current state of the research/debate about the peopling of the Americas? Seems like it's changing every time I check back in on it.
I have zero strong conclusions about it at the minute. Most people would agree that probably, like, if you said 15 to 20,000 years ago, people were in the Americas. I think most people are going to agree with that. The question is, does it go beyond that? There's all these interesting archaeological sites in Brazil. It always seems to be Brazil where these sites were found. And usually there's some sort of question mark about them. But I was just reading one of a glyptodon. I think it's a glyptodon, that like big armored animal, and that seems to have been butchered, and they radiocarbon dated the animal itself as it is bone to like 23, 24, 25,000 years ago, something like that. And that's a really interesting one because if you're radiocarbon dating the animal itself and it has been butchered, then that's really good evidence. The problem is then how do we sort of square like an earlier peopling of the Americas with the genetic evidence we currently have, which also sort of falls between that 15 to 18,000 years ago. I don't know. I can't really answer that. I'm not a geneticist. I would say everyone would agree for the most part 15 to 20. Any beyond that is difficult to reconcile with genetic evidence and stuff like that. That's my summary of where I think the debate is at the minute.
All right. I think I have my answer for this. I think any of the early variolation stuff. So when you think about like Jenner putting pus from smallpox or cowpox into somebody's arm.
Yeah.
Or then putting like actual pus from people and being like, this is an attenuated form. I'd be like, no, we're not doing that. Nope, no way. like any of the stuff, like even if it wasn't, I don't know, they would say it's like live virus or something, but it's like that thing is disgusting pus that came out of somebody's arm. I don't care what I have. I'm not doing that. And
So we would
and then
still be dying
medicine,
of smallpox.
yeah, medicine would have stopped with me because it would just be like, are you kidding? No.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like he kind of did that without everybody's consent. Like I think he did, like the first experiments were on his son or a child in the community. So it was like didn't really know what
Yeah.
was going to happen. But hey, it worked. You can't be mad.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I bet the first few 100 cases or something, he wasn't giving them the full details
Yeah.
about what was going on.
Well, I know too. The George Washington had his troops variolated. So like basically like an early form of vaccination. But they were smallpox inoculations, but it was more of a live virus at that point. And so
Yeah.
there was like still a decent chance that you would get smallpox from it.
Yeah.
And so it kind of probably led to some really like primordial vaccine hesitancy. But in those days, like it would have been pretty well founded to the point where I think if you look at the data, it was not worth inoculating yourself against smallpox unless a smallpox epidemic was starting somewhere else.
Mm.
So that's what pushed George Washington to make sure his troops got it. But otherwise, if there wasn't an active smallpox epidemic kind of burning through the community, not worth it. Some of you guys will get smallpox and you'll start like another epidemic. But your rates of survival were like 10x if smallpox did hit the city that you were in.
Yeah, it's interesting you're speaking about like vaccine hesitancy because those people in those times were so familiar with everyone dropping down dead all the time.
Yeah.
That I think so much of our vaccine skepticism is I'm not a skeptic of them, but I think a lot of it comes from the fact that all our kids are surviving. Like no one's just dropping down dead all the time. We've just forgotten what that was like.
There's so many different cultures too, where it was like Inca, and there still are communities out there today that you don't name your kids until they're like 2 or 3 or 4 because it's so likely you're going to lose them. And then of course like the Black Death too. There wasn't any variolation against it, but there's these different stats, a huge range if you look at the original Black Death stats, and it's kind of like sometimes people say 25 or 30% of Europe was wiped out. Some people say 50 or even more percent. And that sort of gels with some more recently, scholars have kind of favored some of those higher numbers, and you can kind of see like parish records give you an idea that in some communities it was super, super high, like 50, 60, 70%. And I just randomly looked up because we did the Knights versus Pirates War, and that's late 1300s. But one of the Grand Masters of the Teutonic Knights he was known for being very pious, and he was like familiar with this woman who was canonized, was a saint, and she wasn't a nun. She had a family and kids, and I just looked it up, and it was like she had 8 children, and 5 of them died of the plague. And I'm like, okay, that must be a pretty representative sample. Like it's just that's the pressure that would be needed for me to be like, yeah, give me the cow pus, like
yeah.
But as it is right now,
you just like left your house full of dead people, and you'll be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, so much of this stuff, so much technological innovation or medicine would have stopped with me. I'd be like, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. Someone comes up with the idea for like, oh, we can have this big, huge, screeching hunk of metal powered by steam, and we'll burn the coal. I'd be like, no, it's probably not safe. We'll stick to the horses.
Yeah,
like I don't know. I would have stopped so much progress. I'm happy that there are braver people than me to make the world a better place. Joe, do you have any historical event that you would have pushed?
I kind of have a clarifying question. Is this I have like a bug on my mic. Oh. Is this like me as in raised in that culture and that environment, or me as in 21st century Joseph Feely goes back with the knowledge he has of his.
However you want to play
Because
it.
if it's the latter one, then I feel a moral obligation to go to every turning point of history that results in mass deaths. So I would do that, but
That's not a fun answer.
yeah, but that's not a fun answer because that's almost like too morally deterministic. So the fun answer would be, I think even Joe, raised in 4th century Athens, I'd like to think I would have been able to convince Socrates not to drink the hemlock after he was condemned by the Athenian court. I just feel like the accounts really, they kind of stop at like, okay, Socrates' pupils say, we can get you out of here. You have a way out. You don't have to die. We can flee. But I'm like, okay, with Socrates, you need to have a Socratic dialogue to convince him of anything, and no one did that. So I'd like to think I could go there and be like, okay, Socrates, you're saying that you are trying to teach your pupils to face their fate when the opportunity arises, and this is what you're doing. You're going to drink the hemlock after you've been condemned to die. And I would say, like, well, so why do you think that? Why don't you, could it be cowardice for you to give in to the Athenian court when you feel like the charges against you are false? And then I like to think I could be one of those long 30-page Socratic dialogues, and then at the end, me and Socrates happily go away, and we survive from then on out, and he can open his school somewhere outside of Athens. So
Yeah, that would be a good one.
So you would have saved one of the most the life of like
people.
one of the most influential philosophers, and I would have stopped the progress of medicine from saving thousands of lives.
I mean,
It's very possible I would have like made philosophy incredibly monolithic, though, because if Socrates survived, you wouldn't have all these branching Platonic and Aristotelian schools. So
I mean, if he was as good a philosopher as we believe he was, maybe he'd have convinced you to drink it with him. Maybe just
by the end of that,
Socrates, you're right. Let's give up.
Yeah, you're right. Actually,
You're just waiting in the time machine for Joe to get back.
I'm just like waving to you guys. Like,
anyone see Joe? You just see like a cup roll past the door of your time machine.
Damn, Socrates, he's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have my third and final question for you, and then you'll give it to us. But mine was, how has studying prehistory shaped your view of humanity? Obviously, we extended it a little bit to include Neanderthals, but
yeah. Well, for a start, my view of humanity is expanded to like everyone. I would view everyone as human from like 1.5 million years ago. I know not everyone would agree with that, but I think if we could watch them, it would be hard not to think of them as human. Still different to us in many ways, but that when I think of human, that's what I'm thinking in my head. And then I don't know. It's just we do seem to be, I would say, pretty. In many ways, we're very nice. Lots of art. We've done a lot, but we're pretty terrible too. A lot of the time, I think. I don't know. There's so many examples of human groups just coming to an end. Thousands of them, uncountable numbers of them, and really every corner of the planet we've gone to, we've killed all the biggest animals. Like when humans enter a region, the big animals go down. That's just the pattern. And I don't know, maybe that's kind of a bummer, but we're just, I don't know. It's I feel the more I know, the more unsure I am about everything in a way, if you know what I mean. The more you look into a topic,
you're
it's
past
like
the initial bump of Dunning-Kruger. You're like starting to realize how much you don't know because there's so much.
Yeah. when people are like, "How do you define it, a human to you?" It's like, oh god, I can't even tell you, to be honest. I know people want like a philosophical answer, but I don't know.
You never had a profound eureka moment studying. It's more just been like, oh God, I don't know about this. And
yeah, it's just more. I'd say it's a lot more existential dread than a eureka moment.
I
But
am a Neanderthal.
we are. I mean, in a way, we really are. Everyone, like our lineage, this guy's lineage, they're interconnected for sure.
So ever like a kind of like a Cain and Abel moment for you, looking back at the archaeological record, and you're like, oh god, this is grisly. Like these people just absolutely murdered each other here. Was there ever any remnants of warfare or battle that you saw that just made you stand back?
I mean, yeah, we're really terrible. I can't remember the exact cave off the top of my head. But there are many. Oh, wow, this is a good one, actually. The Cima de los Huesos. I think it's that one. Atapuerca. I think pretty sure all of the remains in there are of like butchered juveniles. And there's an idea that chimpanzees, when they meet a rival group, they will often like attack children, and they will often attack women because they're sort of seizing a moment to reduce the numbers of a rival group, seizing the opportunity and it's very low risk to the attacking group. And it's very possible that our ancestors were doing the exact same thing in that area, just like they opportunistically came across like a young member of another group and just ripped him to shreds and chucked him in a hole. To be honest, like it's terrible. That's a horrible thing.
I thought this question was going to have a really beautiful answer about the value of meaning in art. It's like,
I mean, we do art. The art is nice. The art is nice, but we do the other stuff too.
I know there is controversy over to bring down the topic even more. Over Neanderthal cannibalism, because I guess some sites have been found where there were like what looks to be like kind of butcher or knife marks on the bones, but there's debate over whether or not this was like a post-mortem thing they did for burials, or were they actually eating each other or something.
Yeah, there are some where the cases of cannibalism are more straightforward, like how archaeologists attempt to differentiate cannibalism for nutrition and cannibalism out of some, maybe not even cannibalism, but just some sort of like mortuary process involving the bones, is if are the human remains being treated differently to animal remains at the site.
Oh, okay.
And there are some sites where the human bones and the animal bones are treated in exactly the same way, and you are assuming therefore that these Neanderthals were just lunch. That's what they were. Yeah. There are other ones where it's more complicated, where maybe like with the cave in Spain where there's just animal skulls, maybe there's just a skull, or it's been like defleshed in a way that isn't like very nutritious. I don't know. Yeah, they seem to be doing extra stuff. So that's what they attempt to try and understand: are humans being treated differently to prey animals? And that's how they attempt to tell it apart.
Yeah, well,
the art is cool. The art is nice.
Well, the other thing I'd say too, because I talked to somebody else about some Mesoamerican cultures, and he was like, "Oh yeah, these are like the people. They sacrifice. There's so many sacrifices and stuff like that." But I think we also, on the one hand, we kind of have a bias to look at the most, sort of sensational or graphic thing. But it's also, I think this would be the case in the archaeological record, is that there is no archaeological record of a mother saving a child that isn't her own or something, or sparing,
I have a good example of that actually, in a way.
A starving tribe member or something. But anytime that you find cannibalism or a dead skull or something, you go, look, they murdered and stuff like that. The other thing, though, I think is, sometimes I worry, is there like a cynical bent to history dose, and I've like almost like tried to articulate it in a way that I kind of think there is a common sort of concern about oneself and one's tribe or group and family. That's sort of like that is the basic human impulse to do that. And the best, it's sort of like the final frontier is almost like how do you treat your enemies? And just historically, like nobody can be standing on like you can't be on a high horse saying like, oh, historically my ancestors have treated their enemies nicely. No, everybody like you go through and it's like, how do you treat your enemies? Like you basically kill all of them. And as you start like building into civilization, it's like, well, we won't kill all of them. We'll enslave the women and children. How's that? Like, those are sort of the MO, or like similar thing with like criminality too. As you start growing, it's like there weren't most of these places did not have prisons. It was like you die, you don't steal, you die, or Hammurabi's code will cut your hands off or something. And it's like that's progress.
We're so good. And this almost has an evolutionary purpose behind it. No, not almost. I'm certain it has an evolutionary purpose behind it. But we're very, 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 very good at dividing us and them. We do it in so many different ways. We're so keen to that sense. And there's even an idea that accents evolved.
That's easy for a British person to. I'm just kidding.
Well, my question: if a historical event gone differently, if I were there, I'm not letting you win in 1776, right? I'm not. I'm fed up of all these memes on the 4th of July. I'm going to spare no expense. It's like I'll be like there in my time machine and be like, guys, if we don't keep fighting, you don't understand. Like once a year, there's going to be full of memes, guys, against us.
For the glory of the king.
Yeah, I listened to the Rest is History podcast run by 2 British guys, and they did one on the American Revolution, and I liked it because of like their view of it. Just like Tom's just like, and this is very representative of American politics today. Very paranoid. I mean, we were barely taxing them. They were one of our least colonies, and they start going crazy and throwing stones.
Yeah. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. We were talking about us and them, but there's even an idea that your accent, it's very hard to change your accent after you've grown up in an area. Like I've lived in America for almost 10 years now, and I don't believe I sound American. Maybe I've picked up the accent in some places, some phrases, but yeah, I don't think I do. Yeah. And there's an idea that this has evolved to just be like an immediate, quick way to say, well, that person isn't one of us. Like as soon as they open your mouth, we can identify you as someone we didn't grow up with. And there are all these sorts of ideas. We're so keen on that us and them sense, and we constantly have to fight against it in a way. But
well, there's a I think he's a psychologist named Jamil Zaki, psychologist, and he does work on cynicism and basically how people their default view of other people. And basically what he's found, at least doing modern research, is that people overrate how selfish and how much of a threat other people are, like consistently by a huge factor. And so there was something where like they had people find $20 or $50 or something, might have been more, might have been like 100, and like you could return it, or you could just keep it. And so the people who returned it, when they returned it, they asked, how many other people do you think did this? And they guessed that like only 40% of people gave the money back. And the actual number was 80%. And his thinking is it kind of made some evolutionary sense that like we are happier if we trust other people more. But in a survival sense, it's better to be safe and sort of have some false positives and be, not trust the outsider than it is to trust them and let them into your camp and, say, yeah, I think he's a swell guy. Like, you'd rather turn away some good people than let in some bad people.
Yeah. No, that sense is so deeply ingrained in us, and you can so clearly see, like you say, the survival advantage behind it. But now the world is so interconnected, we're living in such huge groups, maybe it's become a disadvantage. I don't know, maybe it's holding us back a little bit, but you can see
we
the
do
logic.
that with the past too. Maybe we think people are more default brutal than they were, when in actuality it might be the people in power or the people who have armies or something are more brutal, but your common villager is pretty similar to you and I.
This is why it's so hard when we're talking about our view of humanity. It's like sometimes we do great stuff. A lot of the time we do great stuff. And then very soon after we could do something absolutely crazy. It's just, we're just so hard to pin down like that.
If it was 10% are murderers, then society doesn't work anymore,
Yeah.
But still, like 90% are pretty swell people.
Yeah.
Okay, you got a question for me, the third and final question? Then I have a couple just from YouTube, and we'll get to some in the chat. Of course, if we do super chat, we'll give you some priority here, but we'll do that after. Hit us with your question here.
This isn't a question, but I was kind of interested, as we were saying just before we hopped online. Your video's very involved in the narrative, and mine are more sort of just explainers. And it's interesting to kind of think about how the other one would make a video for the other person. So I just wondered if it'd be interesting to like pitch an idea for each other's channels. Let's imagine for a moment we've been hired as the producer for each other's channels. What video are you going to make? What video are you going to pitch, do you think? Well, because it's interesting
pitch to
for
you.
Me to... Yeah, I can pitch an idea to you guys. You can pitch an idea to me, because it's interesting to see how the other person sort of views our channel, and I'm curious to know what other people want to know about prehistory in a way.
Yeah, but, like if you hired me for one video, what would I do? But I have to keep it with the theme of your channel. I would want some case where we can tell a lot about some specific set of bones. So I feel like Otzi is too cliche, but something like that, where just kind of like, this is how this person would have lived. They died in this way. And I would couch it in sort of some speculation, but being able to tell like a bit of a personal story. So having a certain figure and going through how they lived and what they lived off of and what they would have seen as they moved around hunting mammoths. I'm also, whenever we're doing videos too, I'm thinking about the art. So it's like, if I'm just like, all right, this is a beautiful setting. We have, some mammoth hunting Joe can do right here. And then, basically I want like a defined person. If it's just like one artifact or something, I feel like I can't latch onto it. But if it's like, here's somebody, I don't know. There are those cases too where somebody's like leg heals the femur bone or something, and it's maybe that's like a positive way you can do it. But generally speaking, find me an injured skeleton with.
I did kind of do that with this one. I don't know if you saw Life and Death of a Neanderthal.
I think I watched the one of Lucy. I don't know if I watched that one, but I think
this is a contender for a Neanderthal we know the most about. They maybe even had their arm amputated. I've even got their arm bone here. But
you did it.
Yeah, I did it. I did it. But this is their like withered arm bone.
Wow.
And it had kind of been, obviously this is just a replica of it, of course. People always ask me that. They seemingly survived long enough for their arm to heal, having been cut off.
Jeez.
And this is a Neanderthal that lived, 50 to 70,000 years ago. So,
like cut off, you think, with a stone weapon?
If it was cut off, the only thing they had to do it with was stone. Yeah, so it would have been pretty painful. But who knows? Maybe it was just like crushed maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
It's totally deformed. Like his whole arm, you can see it's so crooked. His whole arm had been like totally shattered and healed, and it seems had lost like his lower arm too.
Yeah, like the way I would set it up, because I'm always looking for pure immersion. That's part of the reason I'm not on screen or something. I kind of want you to forget that I'm there.
Yeah.
And now we'll put me in the ad segments a little bit, so you know I'm not AI.
Yeah.
And we put written and illustrated by humans, but I don't have
Do people
an AI
think you're
voice
doing
anymore.
AI? Do people think you're doing AI stuff these days?
Yeah.
Yeah,
not so
they
much
did.
anymore. They used to, but we've radicalized a subsection of our base to attack anyone who accuses us of such witchery. So
Yeah.
We
people
didn't
be
ask
like,
them to do that,
Joe
but-
has speed paintings. He has his own YouTube channel. You can look at his art station page and stuff. So
Yeah.
But yeah, we I don't know. So like, but I want just pure immersion. So I would, I'm just thinking like opening up on some sort of like prehistoric savanna or something, or plains, and just recreating what we think a settlement looked like and what daily life would have been like as a nomad. And then toward the end, you can imagine having this person die and sort of speculating about, we know the arrow entered through the back or something. Was this a rival tribe? Was this, an enemy within their settlement or something? And then cut to, 10,000 years later or however many years later, and we're looking at the bones and we just say this is, I don't know, we package it some way, we say something about humanity.
Yeah.
I would
maybe something nicer than what you said.
I would
Lucy was a terrible person.
Yeah.
I would pitch you this, and maybe don't do it because I might want to do it. But I would say you open up on a mummified body in a tomb. In it,
Demonetized.
I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Is an ornate Egyptian bucket. It's a bunch of Egyptian glass beads from King Tut's workshop. And then you have Mesopotamian amulets and a Phlangian sword from the ancient Greeks. We zoom out, we realize it's a Scandinavian burial mound from 14th century BC. And then you go into all the trade relations that the Nordic Bronze Age had with ancient Egypt during King Tut's era and with the ancient Greeks and the Mesopotamians, to the point that in King Tut's tomb, they had amber from Scandinavia. So I think that would be like a cool video to start, where you think you're in a completely different world and then you zoom out and you're like, oh no, we're here. And then you can go into like how the world was connected so much during the Bronze Age.
Damn. This is why you guys are so good at what you do.
Thank you.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Did you have a pitch for us?
One idea I had, I've sort of been thinking about doing this for my own channel, but I just think it's just not the right fit. I don't know. But who do you think it was the first European to cross North America?
To cross North America?
Or of European descent, including
Of European
Americans.
descent.
Most people, I think, would say Lewis and Clark.
That's like the immediate pop answer in my head. Are you saying to cross the entire continent of North America?
Well, this is where
Spaniard from Florida.
Well, this is where it's sort of like, that's the clickbait title. This is where the bait and switch. People think they're going into a video about Lewis and Clark, and then it's immediately set in the 1560s. And there's a chap called David Ingram, who, this account is not disputed, but he was part of an English attempt to do some piracy down in the Caribbean. He ended up with 100 others having to be put ashore in Mexico. And him and 3 others made it all the way to Nova Scotia, where they knew they could get in contact with an English fishing vessel. And in the end, they were picked up by a French fishing vessel, but they walked from Mexico to Nova Scotia in the 1560s.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. And
I'll
there's
bookmark
just
that.
like one account of it when he had to give the details back in England. But no one disputes the fact that he was dropped off in Mexico and picked up in Nova Scotia.
Crazy.
Like,
Imagine what he saw.
yeah.
Did he have a journal or something?
The only thing we have is the notes from his interrogation. And a book was just published on it that I've been reading, and it's kind of interesting.
So this is one of those 103 million view topics. You can guarantee us that, right?
I don't know. Maybe I would like to think 300,000.
You kind of wonder, like, what the
I'll take 300,000.
I think that's a really interesting one, just because I love upending, like almost like what you did with the tomb. Like you think you're one place and it zooms out, and someone thinks like, "Oh, he's going to talk about Lewis of Clark," and then boom, immediately you're in 1560s.
Yeah,
It's like, what the hell is this?
I like the article. Ingram and a few others from his party decide to march northwards to the interior of Newfoundland, ignorant of the fact that Newfoundland was 3,000 miles away. They thought it was the town over or something.
Yeah, they're like, how far could it be?
If he's on that East Coast, like you're kind of coming in contact with people that you think their first contact is sort of like Jamestown or Plymouth Colony, and you just have, you know, hypothetically some Spaniard guy just walks through like it doesn't really stay. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm just passing through.
Yeah, it took him 11 months apparently to get there, which I think is pretty good going, to be honest.
He claimed to have encountered elephants. I think that might be
this is where
embellishment going on here.
Mammoths.
This is where the new book comes into it. So what's confused other accounts is that their mission went to Africa before it went to the Caribbean.
Oh, okay.
And people think, like in the retelling of it, that they've confused accounts. That he said he came across elephants. Yeah, but they were in Africa for like several months before they sailed across to go to the Caribbean.
Wow.
So
it's quite an adventure.
I'll show you. This was let me see here. So this is like 1400s, like early. It's kind of like some medieval European exploration into Africa, but people would come back and just claim random things, like, you know, 70% of it will be true, but I think you got to sell the books and stuff, so you throw in some extra stuff. But what we got here, I guess this was like an actual nomadic group there, but it came back and said that these people didn't have heads and their faces were just in their chest.
Nice.
And the guy on the right has one eye.
Yeah.
And the one in the middle
and one leg.
One big leg. And it's just like, yeah, trust me. You got at that point, it's like, you know, for the next few hundred years, like none of you guys are gonna prove me wrong. As long as I'm alive, you guys won't prove me wrong. The book, and you mess with people's history.
Not only was it before the internet, it was before like 90% of people ever left their village.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what would you put on your channel if you could never be disproven?
Yeah. It's a
well, actually, there are people that put out a lot of fake stuff.
Plenty of people don't care about that.
Internet.
Yeah.
It's like the AI stuff. Sometimes you just see like a completely AI video recommended to us, and it's just like, it's like a 5,000. It might have like 5,000 views, and people are like, oh, great editing or something. And it's like mostly, it's like 20% of the stuff is wrong, and the art of course is all wrong, and it's always like the same narrator voice they're copying. So no one thinks I'm AI because my voice is not worth AI copying.
Yeah,
but it's just like. The disgusting secrets of ancient Egypt. The sexy pharaoh.
Scientists cannot believe what they found.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure they have a bunch of like prehistoric stuff that they're doing.
There's so many, man. There's so many. That's why, honestly, I'm appearing in my thumbnails straight from the get-go, especially because I appear in the video anyway.
Yeah.
I'm setting that expectation from the front.
That's a
Like,
smart idea.
This is a human video. This is made by a human. And
Maybe
as
we
part
should
of me
do
as
that
well.
with Chris. Put him in the. Do you put yourself in the corner, right? Like the bottom corner of your thumbnails? Yeah.
Not
Well,
necessarily.
now since my last video, I've got someone who actually knows what they're doing. Shout out to Cheyenne. But before I was just throwing myself anywhere. But now someone else with an eye for design actually helps me. But back to that David Ingram thing. I just think a tale of exploration. It doesn't have to be David Ingram, because maybe there's not enough juicy details in the accounts for you guys because you like to stick to the accounts so well. But a voyage of exploration, I think, suits History Dose so well. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think that's
Or
something
globe-trotting stuff.
You could really smash out. Yeah, like Magellan, the Voyage of Magellan. That would be a great candidate for a 1 hour History Dose banger.
Yeah,
For
no, we
sure.
have a lot of people asking us. Well, we're both a quarter Filipino. Our grandfather's from the Philippines, so
No way.
there's some Filipino history that could tie in there.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to get to a couple comments we had from the YouTube. Just the community post I made before. The first was, I'm intrigued by the enormous drop in global sea levels during the last ice age. Did it have any interesting effect on human history? I'm not qualified to answer that question, but what do you think?
Any effects on human history? Well,
The
I guess globe was easier to travel around, you could say. You know, Australia, Papua New Guinea, they're all one giant landmass called Sahul. Obviously, distances. Europe, there's no Bosphorus, I think is the Bosphorus, between Istanbul. Gone. Could just walk straight in. The gap between the southern tip of Arabia and the Horn of Africa was like half a mile at some point, like very small, probably scattered with islands too. So I think the lower sea levels, of course, aided our ability to travel around the globe in a big way. It's also a challenge for archaeologists because there's probably quite nice places to live. There's low-lying, close to the water. Yeah, we're probably missing a lot of archaeology because those areas are so difficult to access.
It completely drowned Atlantis.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking about this today. Do you know Doggerland, where Britain was joined to Europe? Have you heard of that?
No.
So this is Britain only became an island about 6 to 8,000 years ago. Britain.
Oh, that's the Neanderthal. Yeah.
And there's a part of Doggerland which was higher than everywhere else. It's called Dogger Bank, and that when the sea levels rose, that was an island for something like 4,000 years before it eventually sank beneath the North Sea. And it's like, God, that must have been home to humans for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah.
And now it's all gone and we can't access it. But it's interesting to think about these things.
Yeah.
We need to develop better archaeology submarines.
Diverged
for sure.
Group of humans. So the other one here was, and I'll try to give my best interpretation of what's being asked here, but thank you both for your content. I specifically wait until I can sit down to watch. We see so many similarities and stories among different people of the world. What, if anything, has stood out to you as something uniquely a result of a single group's journey across the world? I think they're asking if there are things in the archaeological record or possibly even oral histories that we think comes from some migration. Like, is there a story of migration or some group,
some unique development, something truly unique that some human group has done?
Yeah. But I also think too, I guess I'm always wondering, and I don't know if we have any sense of this, but when we think about the peopling of the Americas, that vast migration, how many generations does it take? Like, what's the average distance that one of those generations is actually crossing? Is Because my sense is that you don't really have like one group that goes, all right, we'll do a 2,500 relocation, 2,500 mile relocation. My sense is that it was bit by bit, and we kind of expanded.
It's tricky to say. There are, so you can see how far someone has traveled between their childhood and their adulthood, because our bones and teeth are made up of all the minerals in the water and the food that we eat and drink. And our teeth stay the same, right? They're never regrowing, but our bones refresh a lot. So you can compare the minerals in the teeth to the bones to get an idea of how far someone has traveled. It's called like isotope analysis. And based on that, we have really good examples of people traveling quite far. So there's a guy buried in Britain in the Bronze Age, the Amesbury Archer. He was almost certainly born in and around the Alps, and he traveled as far as Britain in his lifetime.
Wow.
There's another really interesting example from Americas. Speaking of Americas, this is, as far as I'm aware, something quite unique. So obsidian is a great rock to make tools out of, because it's basically just glass. It's so sharp. And there's a lot of good obsidian here where I am now in Oregon. And they've even found this obsidian in archaeological layers that are about 9,000 years old, as far away as like the Great Lakes and the East Coast. So, or Great Lakes, maybe you would think of that more as the Midwest, I don't know. But as far as the Great Lakes, and it's something like several thousand miles, that's a huge distance for that rock to travel. And it doesn't mean necessarily one person took it the whole way, but still it gives you a sense of the interconnectedness of people in that time period. So that's kind of unique. I can't think of any other object that's traveled as far, that we have evidence for traveling as far as obsidian in North America. It was really prized. So that's something quite unique. One thing that's kind of unique as well, I mentioned this in one of my videos, going back to the start where we have those handprints. There are several handprints in Europe, and not several, I think well over 100, where seemingly they've got fingers missing. And you know, some people hypothesize that they're like folding their fingers down and making the hand shape with their fingers folded down, but that's so difficult. I can barely even do it now. Like, it's so difficult to fold your fingers down that way, especially just like one digit of your middle finger. It's basically impossible. And there is an interesting example of people in, I don't know how many groups in Papua New Guinea, but not many, but certainly in a couple, where they cut a digit of their finger off when they've suffered a loss. Like, let's say your wife dies, you might cut the tip of your finger off as a sacrifice in memory of that person. So that's kind of an interesting thing that people were maybe doing in prehistory. It doesn't have many analogies, but maybe also still persists this day in Papua New Guinea in some places. That's kind of an interesting thing we're doing. But
I'd be like, I think she's still alive, guys. I saw her the other day.
yeah. Moment in history that would have gone differently. I'm not cutting my finger off.
I thought it was really cool. I'm sure you're aware of the Aboriginal cave drawings of what appear to be like Indonesian ships in northern Australia. And they look a lot like them, and they are probably from the pre-British era. And so we have basically what amounts to confirmation there that the like island navigator people had some contact with Aboriginal Australians, and the Australians were not just sort of like isolated there, but at least the ones on the coast would have had some contact or trade with completely different peoples than themselves.
Yeah, I can totally believe that. There was even a Venetian bead uncovered from an archaeological layer in Canada that predated European contact in the Americas.
Wow.
And so the hypothesis is that it went the other way. It was traded all the way across Asia and then traded across the Bering Strait amongst, Alaska natives and Arctic
Wow.
people, and then made it all the way into Canada before European contact.
Wow.
That's kind of an unique artifact. Yeah.
I mean, there's all that stuff like the Polynesian stuff that I thought I remember some genetic study, like possibly finding some Polynesian or Indonesian genes among people on the west coast of South America. Does that ring a bell?
I did a video on it the other way around. Polynesians having Native American DNA.
Okay.
And that still holds true. That's pretty well attested that probably sometime in the 13th century, the 1200s.
It's crazy.
Either Polynesians made it there or Native Americans made it the other way. Obviously, it's impossible to tell. But yeah, the genetic evidence of Polynesians reaching America is on pretty solid ground.
I mean, reached Hawaii and we're very good at being able to like go to different islands skillfully.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be an unsurmountable distance there.
Yeah.
And of course that like 12th century, 13th century is like peak Polynesian navigation time.
Yeah, that's the thing. We can never say we can't say if they made it to America, or maybe Native Americans were on some of the remoter islands in Polynesia when they got there. But it is at the peak time when Polynesians were doing their sailing and they're expanding. So it's likely.
Yeah.
If I was to bet, I would bet it was the Polynesians that made it to America.
Yeah. I wonder because there's so many. We have first contact accounts basically of the Vikings, which of course are kind of like muddied sagas, but we know the Vikings were there, so it would be kind of wild to think that if you were there for years that you didn't run into a single human. But then the other thing is, and then of course like the later European contact, but there are first contact stories that we will never get, and we can only guess at like these completely different people just sailing up one day and being like, I can't talk to you, but they must have been doing a similar thing, like gestures and trying to communicate and understand and trade. And
there's so many like interesting clues of voyages that we've lost forever. Like I did a video years ago now on the Azores.
Yeah.
And
Vikings.
the mice in the Azores are related to Norwegian mice. And everywhere else the Vikings went, like the geographical spread of these mice corresponds so well to known Viking expeditions. It's kind of crazy to think that they got there a different way.
Yeah, they were down there in Iberia too, so raiding and stuff. So it's not out of the question. Okay, I got a question here from Kevin. I think this is the Kevin that went on our Mongolia trip.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kev. If you had a quantum computer that let you look back in time, can quantum computers do that? To witness any event in history, what event would you want to see?
I know I'm big in the Paleolithic, but in terms of human achievements, it's hard to beat the Great Pyramids. I would be
you want to
keen
see
to go back to Old Kingdom Egypt. Yeah, I want to see that alien in the hard hat. It's still probably the greatest achievement of like a pre-industrial society, I would say.
The dating of the pyramids too, it's insane.
Yeah.
I think
crazy achievement.
Yeah. For me, it would have to be either a Mongol battle, so one of the ones where they're like the some of the Khwarezmian stuff where it was like you're on the walls and you're just surrounded by this endless sea of Mongols. Like, what does it look like? Not like I want the computer to let me back. Like I want to be there and then like
key detail
zoom back. But then the other thing I think would probably just be like you pick pyramids, and that maybe this is cliche too, but just like show me Thermopylae. Those are the things that like I'm always interested in making history feel more real than it is.
Yeah.
Than it is currently to us, because it's so easy for these things to just become kind of like a story that we know intellectually happened, but we don't really, it's hard to grasp it. But like, I guess if you have a skull, or you have, when you see like a hoplite helmet, and you're just like, somebody wore this, and this was how you went to war back then. And you would have, you had thousands of people in these shining shields and helmets and feathers and all that stuff, stabbing each other. And I'm sure I'd be scarred for life after seeing that, but I could say I saw it. And I mean, it's like Lord of the Rings stuff, but it happened. That was, at some point, that was how the world worked. And the threat was, the shining legions of Athens and Sparta.
Yeah, that would be cool. It'd be interesting to experience what a Mongol horde smelt like when you're on that wall, just surrounded by
daisies.
just this, like, what did that
fermented mare's milk?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Everyone knows I love the Norse. And I probably would want to see the interactions between the Roman Empire and the Norse prior to the Viking Age, because we do know that the Roman Empire did supply them with weapons and arms and stuff, because they were considered a border region. So even though they're technically not allied with them, it's like, well, if anything bad comes around here, we want you guys to be well armed. And then all the archaeology we have of there is Roman influence on some of the jewelry. Even they began to prefer drinking wine during that age as well. So I would want to see like how Roman did these Norse appear at the time. And I think that would just be kind of fascinating.
That's true. I mean, a weekend in like 2nd century Rome would also be hard to beat, to be honest. Like seeing the city of Rome at the height of its power.
I'd go to a gladiator game just to say you did it. I don't know. I don't morally support what's going on here, but
most gladiator battles weren't to the death, but first blood. But you couldn't guarantee that the first blood won't turn into a death,
or to see it fill up with the
water.
The like simulated sea battles, like pumping.
Oh
the water
something like that. Yeah.
I also think, based on what we were just talking about, just the first contact between the Norse and Native Americans would just be like pure. This is like it's one of those events that you're like, this almost like shouldn't be happening according to the conventional reading of history that we have. Yeah, and we have no idea what happened there. We have what the sagas say happened, and like indigenous people coming to trade, and then at some point they say like one of them tried to grab grab like a sword or an axe, and then they started fighting. And then there was another thing that they said, that they really liked the milk that the Norse had. Which seems like,
really,
to me, that seems like a very real detail.
Yeah, it's like an odd detail.
Yeah, it's
very saga-y.
It's something that they wouldn't otherwise know, that these people couldn't have that unless they had actually met them.
Yeah, they'd be assuming, because they're not bumping into into a culture with domesticated animals like that, domesticated cows,
lactose intolerant.
But we don't know. Is there? I'm also intrigued by the possibility of like we had people, European colonists that would either be captured and continue living with a Native American group, and some of them didn't want to come back eventually, or you have people that willingly went into those groups. It's entirely possible you had some Norse stay, and just like. We never found the bones, or it didn't survive in the DNA record, but it's entirely possible you had mixed families of Norse and Native Americans, and it's hard for them to tell, but I think there are some estimates that it's like over a decade of habitation.
I think
Yeah.
if there's one thing I know about humans, we're talking about as perspective of humanity, we do like to procreate. It would be hard to imagine two
Yeah.
people living alongside each other for decades and
Yeah.
and a baby not coming out of that. We like to do that.
And Norse were very keen on taking brides and stuff. So, what was the place? Is it Iceland where they track the mitochondrial DNA and it was like mostly I don't want to say, I don't want to like declaratively say this, but one of the places that
Iceland had a lot of
Irish
sex slavery as well.
Yeah, but so like if you track the mitochondrial DNA, I think it's of Iceland, maybe it's of Greenland, but if you're looking at the original settlers, some absurd percentage, like over half of that mitochondrial DNA comes from Irish women.
Yeah, I can believe it.
The idea is that you have your like Norwegian Vikings stopping over in Ireland, taking a bride who may or may not wish to be his bride, and then settling in some far off land,
Yeah, it's crazy how far, if you were captured by the Vikings, how far you could go from your homeland through all the different trade routes and stuff.
You're not coming home, probably.
Yeah.
Okay, yep. So studies show that 60 to 65% of Icelandic women today, I guess, carry mitochondrial DNA with origins in Ireland or Scotland.
Wow.
This suggests that Norse Vikings who settled in Iceland often took Celtic women from the British Isles, particularly Ireland, as wives. But I mean, you have to assume that some of that happened if you're there for decades. And then I think there was some evidence too, based on lumber that they had in Iceland and Greenland, basically suggesting that they continued making some trips to Vinland.
I think I did see that. Yeah. How far south do you guys think they went?
Well,
I know that's debated.
I was actually looking into it recently, because there's the whole Maine penny thing.
Yeah, we're in Maine, by the way.
Yeah, we're in Maine. So they found the Norse penny in Maine. But originally it was kind of debunked, and it was like it's an actual Norse penny, but the idea was it's probably planted there. I think there's like a 2017 study, which maybe is amending that, making that seem a little blurry. And one of the odd things about the penny is there's a perforation in it. Right now, like the perforation kind of eroded away, so it just looks like it's been chipped off. But there would have been a perforation for a hole through the penny, which would imply someone usually wearing it or hanging it somewhere, which as far as I can tell, the Norse didn't do that with their own minted currency, but they might do it with like Arab coins and stuff. Yeah. So then there's some idea that this may have actually been traded and Native Americans were wearing it as jewelry or something. So,
wow.
I think if they were going to go south, it's likely they went decently farther south. I don't believe in any of the stuff that says like New York, but I feel like northern Maine is still probable.
Yeah.
You're tracing along
because where is the village that was actually found? Like, what's the name of it again?
Lanceau Meadows.
Lanceau Meadows. Is that Nova Scotia or is that Newfoundland?
Newfoundland.
I think it's like 9 hours from Maine if you're driving or something.
I'd like to go.
That'd be a fun trip for sure.
That's a collab right there. Let's go.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh no, it's 27 hours.
One of those things that there's nothing else in the neighborhood.
27. Wait, where is it?
27-hour drive. So if you were to drive from Maine and then take a boat and everything.
I wish that was like the next History Dose group trip, but I feel like we won't.
You can take a plane there.
We won't have a big itinerary. It's just that. Now
go home. They couldn't be further north, really, in Newfoundland. Well, on the island anyway.
They're finding more stuff around there too. So it's pretty interesting. Like the settlement was bigger than they thought it was. Stuff along the coastline, more foundations.
It looks cool, man. And I'm always up for going to that part of Canada.
Let's go.
I want to go deep into Canada, man. I want to go to Maine actually. Maine looks
When you're in
really
the
nice.
area, let us know. We'll fly up there. We'll meet you
Yeah.
at the Viking settlement.
We'll row up there. That's the content that the people of the internet want.
Yeah, like
Maybe the final content.
40-hour live stream or something.
Yeah. It's like we decided to vote one guy to go overboard because we don't have enough food anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. We got the Starlink in the Viking ship, and we can live stream the whole thing.
Well, we just hit 2 hours. This was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, Stefan.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Stefan.
It was nice chatting
do
to
it
you
again.
guys for the first time. Yeah.
I saw North O2 in our chat earlier.
Sweet.
No, that's
So-
you got to get him on.
Might have to get him on too.
I'm trying. We're
Maybe we
trying
can get
to
all of us
square
on.
together.
Yeah.
Okay.
I-
All right. Until next time, guys. We'll see you.
Oh no.